The wedding was beautiful. White roses everywhere. Soft music playing. Candles on every table. 200 guests all dressed in their finest clothes, laughing, crying happy tears, raising their glasses. And me? I was sitting at table 9. Right side of the room. Third seat from the left. Smiling. Because I had been invited. My best friend of 12 years had personally called me 3 months before and said, "I want you there. You are my person. Please come." And I came. I sat through the entire ceremony without making a single sound. I watched him walk down that aisle. I watched her appear in that doorway in a dress I had never seen before. I clapped when the officiant said they were married. I even hugged them both at the cocktail hour. And then the reception began. And when the MC announced that a special guest would like to say a few words, I stood up from table 9, smoothed my dress, picked up my glass, and walked slowly to that microphone. The room went quiet. My best friend looked at me with the most grateful smile I had ever seen on her face. She had no idea what was coming. My name is Sophia. And this is the story of the two people I trusted most in this world, what they did behind my back for over a year, and what I said into that microphone on the most important night of their lives. I want you to hear every single word. Let me take you back 12 years. I was 17 years old when I met Natalie. First day of college orientation. We were assigned to the same dormitory floor. She knocked on my door to borrow a phone charger and ended up staying for 4 hours talking about everything from our hometowns to our biggest fears to what we wanted our lives to look like at 30. By the end of that first week we were inseparable. Natalie was the kind of person who made every room feel warmer. She laughed loudly and without apology. She remembered every detail you told her, your coffee order, your mother's name, the song that made you cry. She was generous and chaotic and completely unforgettable. I loved her the way you love someone who becomes part of your identity. She was not just my best friend. She was my family. 3 years into college I met Ryan. Ryan was in my economics class. Quiet, focused, the kind of person who always sat near the front and actually took notes by hand. He was not the most obvious person in any room, but once you started talking to him you realized he was the most interesting. We became friends first. Study sessions that ran until midnight. Long walks across campus talking about everything and nothing. And then one evening sitting on a bench outside the library he looked at me and said, "I think I have been in love with you for about 6 months." I just needed to be sure before I said it out loud. I had been feeling the same thing for longer than that. We dated for 3 years. And here is where the story really begins. Because throughout those 3 years, Natalie and Ryan were also close. I had introduced them in the first month of our relationship. I wanted the two most important people in my life to know each other. They got along immediately. Too well, I would later understand. But at the time I saw it as the best possible thing. My boyfriend and my best friend liked each other. We spent weekends together, all 3 of us. Dinners, road trips, movie nights. I thought I had everything. I thought we were the perfect circle. I had no idea that 2 people inside that circle were slowly building something behind my back. Ryan and I broke up when I was 25. It was not dramatic. It was not one big fight or one terrible moment. It was the slow uncomfortable realization that we had grown into different directions. He wanted to move to another city for a career opportunity. I had just started building my own business in the city we lived in. Neither of us was wrong. We were just no longer going the same way. We sat in his apartment on a Sunday evening and we ended things honestly and without cruelty. He cried a little. I cried more. We hugged at the door for a long time. And when I walked away I genuinely believed we had handled it with maturity and care. I called Natalie on my way home. She answered immediately. She listened to everything I said. She did not interrupt once. When I finished she said, "I am so sorry, Sophia. I know how much he meant to you. I am here for whatever you need." I cried on the phone with her for an hour. She stayed on the line the entire time. What I did not know, what I could not have possibly imagined in that moment, was that Ryan and Natalie had been talking privately for 2 months before that breakup. Not about anything innocent. About each other. I found this out much later. But let me tell you the timeline as I eventually pieced it together because the timeline is what makes this so difficult to process. They began messaging privately in January. Ryan and I broke up in March. By April they were meeting in person without telling anyone. By June they were in a relationship. By August Natalie told me she had met someone. She was vague about who he was. She said she did not want to jinx it. I was happy for her. I encouraged her. I asked questions and listened to her talk about this mystery person with excitement in her voice. I never once suspected. Why would I? She was my best friend. The person who had stayed on the phone with me the night I cried about losing Ryan. The person I trusted with every version of myself. For 6 months she sat across from me at coffee shops and dinner tables and described her new relationship to me in careful vague terms while knowing exactly who she was describing. 6 months. And then one evening in October she called me. She said, "Sophia, I need to tell you something and I need you to hear me out before you react." And she told me. Her new boyfriend was Ryan. They had not planned it. It had just happened. She had been afraid to tell me. She hoped I could understand. She said she loved me and she did not want to lose me and she was sorry for not telling me sooner. I remember the exact feeling in my chest when she finished speaking. It was not rage. It was not shock. It was something quieter and more permanent than either of those things. It was the feeling of something breaking that I knew could never be fully repaired. I said very little on that call. I told her I needed time to think. I hung up. And I sat alone in my apartment for a very long time. Here is what most people expected me to do. Scream. Cut them both off immediately. Post something on social media. Tell all of our mutual friends. Make it loud and ugly in public. I did none of those things. Instead I did something that confused everyone around me. I forgave them. Or at least, I said I did. I called Natalie back 2 days later and I said, I am not going to pretend this did not hurt. It did. Deeply. But I also understand that feelings are not always something people can control. I need some space for now, but I do not want to lose you completely. She cried. She thanked me. She said I was the most gracious person she had ever known. Over the following year I kept a careful distance. I was polite when I saw Ryan. I was warm but measured with Natalie. I did not cause drama. I did not say cruel things to mutual friends. I processed everything privately. And I watched. Because something about the way Natalie had told me the story never quite sat right with me. She said they had not planned it. That it just happened. But the timeline did not match those words. January messages. March breakup. April meetings. June relationship. Things that just happen do not follow that kind of careful quiet timeline. So while I kept my face calm and my words kind, I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored. Old conversations I scrolled back through. Dates that suddenly meant different things. Moments I had been present for that I now understood differently. And the more I looked, the more I found. There were signs as far back as the previous summer. Small moments I had dismissed as nothing. A look between them I had not understood. A conversation that had gone quiet when I entered the room. A trip Ryan had taken that he said was for work but that I now remembered Natalie had been unusually unavailable during. None of it was evidence of anything definitive. But all of it together painted a picture that told me their story about things just happening was not the complete truth. And then 18 months after Natalie told me about Ryan, she called again with new news. She said, "Sophia, Ryan proposed. We are getting married." I told her congratulations. She paused and then asked me the question I had been waiting for. She said, "I know this is a lot to ask. But would you come to the wedding? It would mean everything to me to have you there." I said yes immediately. She sounded relieved and grateful. She had no idea that I had spent 18 months preparing for exactly this moment. I want to be very clear about something. I did not plan anything dishonest. I did not plan to lie or fabricate or destroy anything that was not already true. What I planned was simply this. I was going to tell the truth. All of it. In the right place. At the right time. In front of the right people. Because the one thing Natalie and Ryan had never done was tell the truth completely. Not to me. And not to the people around them who believed their love story was as clean and spontaneous as they had presented it. Their families did not know the full timeline. Their friends did not know the full timeline. Everyone believed the version Natalie and Ryan had carefully crafted. Two people who found each other after their friend's relationship naturally ended. A love story that no one had planned. I had the real version. And I had documentation. Over 18 months I had quietly gathered things. Screenshots of messages Natalie had accidentally shown me before she realized what she was revealing. A voicemail Ryan had left on my phone 3 weeks before our breakup that I had never deleted, a voicemail where he mentioned needing to sort something out with someone in a way that made no sense to me then but made complete sense now. A message from a mutual friend who had seen Ryan and Natalie together in February, 1 month before our breakup, at a restaurant across the city, who had mentioned it to me casually at the time and thought nothing of it. I kept everything. I told no one I was keeping it. And on the morning of their wedding I put everything in a small folder. I wore a navy blue dress. Simple. Elegant. The kind of dress that says I am not here to cause a scene. I arrived on time. I sat at table 9. I smiled all evening. And when the MC asked if anyone would like to say a few words to the happy couple, I raised my hand. 200 people looked at me as I walked to the microphone. Natalie's face lit up. Ryan looked surprised but not alarmed. He smiled politely. I held my champagne glass in one hand and the small folder in the other. I said, "For those who do not know me, my name is Sophia. I have been Natalie's best friend for 12 years. And I have known Ryan for 9 years. I think I can say without exaggeration that I know both of them better than almost anyone in this room. People smiled. A few nodded. Natalie pressed her hand to her heart. I said, when Natalie asked me to come today, she said it would mean everything to have me here. And I want her to know that I take that seriously. Which is why I decided that tonight deserved the real story. Not the version that sounds beautiful at a wedding. The actual story of how these two people found each other. The room shifted slightly. A few people exchanged glances. Ryan's smile became fixed. I said, Ryan and I dated for 3 years. When we ended things in March, he told me he needed to move forward. What he did not tell me was that he had already begun moving forward 2 months earlier. In January. With Natalie. Complete silence. I said, Natalie told me they had not planned it. That it just happened. But I want to share something with everyone here tonight because I think love stories deserve accuracy. I opened the folder. I did not read every document. I simply held it up and described what was inside. I said, I have messages from January. I have a voicemail from February. I have a witness who saw them together in the same month. 3 weeks before Ryan and I officially ended our relationship. Natalie had gone completely white. Ryan stood up. He said, Sophia, this is not the place. I looked at him calmly and said, you are right. The place for this was probably one of the 100 conversations I sat through where both of you described your relationship to me as something that simply happened. But since we did not have the truth then, I thought tonight was as good a time as any. I turned back to the room. I said, I am not here to ruin anything. What is done and they are married now and I genuinely wish them a long life together. But I want every person in this room to understand something. I looked directly at Natalie. I said, you called me the night Ryan and I broke up. You stayed on the phone with me for an hour while I cried. You said you were there for whatever I needed. And you already knew. You had already been talking to him for 2 months. You let me cry to you about losing him while you were already with him. My voice did not shake. I had practiced this moment enough times that my voice did not shake once. I said, that is the part one could never forgive. Not the relationship. The phone call. I set the microphone down gently. I placed the folder on the table in front of me. I picked up my purse. And I walked out of that reception hall without looking back. The room behind me was completely silent until the doors closed. And then I heard it begin. The questions. The voices. The movement of 200 people processing what they had just heard. I got into my car. I drove home. And for the first time in 18 months I felt like I could breathe completely. In the weeks that followed I received messages from many people. Some were angry with me. They said I had ruined a wedding and been cruel and selfish. Some were the opposite. People I barely knew who said they had suspected something was wrong with Ryan and Natalie's story and felt relieved that someone had finally said what they were thinking. Natalie did not contact me for 3 months. When she finally did, she sent a single message. It said, I know I hurt you. I am sorry for the phone call most of all. You were right about that. I read it 3 times. I did not reply. Ryan sent nothing. As for me? I rebuilt. I focused on my business. I made new friends. I traveled alone for the first time in my life and discovered that I was much better company for myself than I had previously believed. I am not going to tell you I am completely healed. Betrayal from 2 people at once does not heal quickly or cleanly. There are still moments when I think about that phone call. About sitting on my kitchen floor crying while Natalie stayed on the line saying all the right things. But I am also not going to tell you that walking out of that reception hall was a mistake. Because it was not. Every person in that room deserved the truth. And I deserved to be the one who finally told it. My name is Sophia. I was invited to my best friend's wedding. And I said nothing. Until the toast.